Hello everyone, this is John from RPGs and More, and in today's video I would like to discuss a system that I have recently gotten re-interested in. Now this is a rule system that I backed the first edition of when it was first released on Kickstarter, and then it kind of fell off my radar after it was delivered. I played it for a little while, for a couple months, and it was really fun, and I enjoyed it. But things moved on. I moved on, and it fell off the radar. Well, during quarantine, it kind of fell back onto my radar thanks to a few things that happened, and I started reading it again. I haven't played it recently, but I'm really intrigued by it, and I've been rereading it, and I wanted to talk about it. And that system is Tiny Dungeon. Now, again, my primary experience was with the first edition of this game by Smoking Salamander Games, and now I'm looking at the second edition of the game. This is what this book is. There's also a small player's handbook of the game that has rules for players only. This is the big deluxe copy that's got a bunch of tiny settings that go along with it, and it's really pretty neat. So why is this system interesting? Why am I recommending it? I recommend Tiny Dungeons for three primary reasons. First, it is a breeze to run. The system itself utilizes a very simple mechanic. You roll between 1 and 3 six-sided dice. If one of them or any of them come up a 5 or a 6, you have succeeded in whatever action or save you were rolling. If most of the time you're going to be rolling 2 six-sided dice for a regular action. If you have advantage, then you will roll 3 six-sided dice. If you have disadvantage, you will roll 1 six-sided dice. Typically, if something gives you disadvantage, then it usually takes a magical item in order to give you advantage again. So basically, once you get disadvantage in something, you don't like, I get disadvantage from one source, but then I get, advantage from something else, so that bumps you up to normal. No. If you get disadvantage, then you're disadvantaged. That's it, unless it's overcome by magic. Anyway, it's a very simple system to run. The primary rules of the system exist through the traits that you can give your character that determine when you roll advantage for something and when you don't. And that's where most of the character creation is going to be spent, is figuring out the traits. Now, what's interesting is there's not that many traits. There's only a few in this book. Now, I am waiting on delivery of the kind of compendiums of all the tiny zines that were released from 2018 through 2020. I'm getting the 3 different compendiums. They'll be coming in, and then I'll be able to add more to my lexicon of Tiny Dungeon material. But in its core right now, there's not a whole lot. So what you do when you're making a character is you come up with your character's name, then you come up with your character's heritage, and that can be any. There's a couple of different ones in this book. Let's go there right now. Okay. So name always comes first for me. Then we go to the heritage for your character. Then after that, you select 3 unique traits for your character. Then you select a weapon group that your character is proficient with. And then you select your family trade and your character's beliefs. So let's look at the heritages. These are pretty standard, bog standard for the main book, which you can expect. A lot of people try to have more or less Tolkien-esque options available so that people can recognize what it is. You know what to expect. You've got your humans. Humans, the thing that sets them apart is they get 1 additional trait from the trait list. That's their special thing. The other thing is humans have a baseline, or they start with 6 hit points. 6. That's another interesting part about this system. Hit points are not given based on your class. There are no classes in this system. It's classless. Instead, your hit points are based on what your heritage is. So who you are dictates how much health you're going to start the game with. Hit points, rather than simply your character's health, are kind of an aggregate of both your character's health, your natural affinity with weapons, as well as your character's ability to utilize armor, because armor is not an object in this system. And in the core part of the system, there's optional rules to add it in. But in the core system, armor is just something that your character has. So if you want your character to be decked out in plate mail armor at the beginning of the game, then you just draw a picture of your character wearing plate mail armor, or state my character runs around in plate mail. There's no rule effect for that. It's just, it happens. And I think that's kind of neat because it allows people to kind of visualize what their characters look like and what they want their character to look like and do, instead of being beholden to an item list. I kind of like the crunchy item list kind of stuff, but I can definitely see the appeal of the freedom instead, where such things become flavor instead of a necessity. So that's humans. Then we go to the Fae. They're not elves, they're Fae. And so you can have a lot of different types fall under the same single category of Fae. Anyway, all Fae start with 6 hit points and the heritage trait, Bow Mastery, which means that they automatically start with mastering the bow. This kind of pigeonholes a little bit, but I imagine that if you had a DM, a game master who is generous, they would let you swap that out for something more appropriate, as long as it wasn't more powerful. I'm sure that would be something that could happen if you just really you want to play an elf, but you don't want to do the bow mastery. The other part of this is, though, if you want to play an elf, but you don't want to have the bow mastery, then you could always just select human as your heritage, and then select the traits that you feel would play into whatever it is, whatever kind of Fae creature you want to be, and then ask your DM, like, is this okay if I am this, but these are my traits? And then the DM most likely will say, yeah, sure, go for it, because at this point it's just role playing. Anyway, so we got the Fae. We have the dwarf. The dwarf starts out with 8 hit points, and the dwarf gets dark vision, which means they're able to see in the dark, like they're wearing a pair of infrared goggles. And if bright light burns close to them, then they're hit by it, and that's it. They're blinded for a round. So that's kind of neat. Not everyone gets it, just dwarves. Okay. Goblins are an option. Goblins are cool. I love to use goblins as antagonists. I think they also make great protagonists, depending on what kind of story you're telling and how your players feel about the little scrappy goblins. I use them as both, and I like them as both. So they have 4 hit points. Ooh. And they start with Goblin Agility, meaning that they always get to roll. They're rolling with disadvantage every time, but whenever they get hit, they get to roll 1 6-sided die to try to negate that hit, because they're just that much. They have that much extra agility. So you could actually, if you had a goblin running around with like armor and a shield, they'd be pretty tanky. They'd not have a lot of hit points, but they'd be hard to hit them. So that's kind of neat. Then there's the Salamar. The Salamar are from the first edition of the Tiny Dungeon game, and they are a sentient race of bipedal humanoid salamanders. They're kind of cool. You can pick. They start with 5 hit points, and they get to pick one of 2 2 traits for their heritage, which basically means, do they heal from heat or do they heal from the cold, kind of stuff. I think that's all that is. Then there's the tree folk, which are new, and they're kind of neat. So if you ever wanted to be Groot, book's got you covered. If you ever wanted to be Treebeard, book's got you covered. Then there's the Karhu. I think that's how you pronounce it. Or Karhu, I don't know. Karhu. and they are sentient bipedal bears. They, excuse me. Oh, the tree folk start with 9 hit points, and the trait Ancient Heart, which is kind of neat. And then the Kirhu start with 7 hit points, and then the Powerful Claws Heritage trait, which basically means they have these big old claws on the ends of their hands that they use for most of their attacks. So like they claw, bite kind of thing. But they really don't use ranged weapons, and they generally don't use melee weapons either, except for their claws. Not that they can't, but they generally don't. And then lastly, there's the lizard folk. And the lizard folk start with 6 hit points, but then also get the cold-blooded heritage trait, which means it's really hard to influence a lizard person or lizard folk. Anyway, so then we get to the trait list, and that's pretty long. I'm not going to read all the traits because that'd be a bit more than what this little video is all about. But the traits list here is kind of the heart and soul of the system, because you start out with 3 traits, 4 if you're human. You pick from this list, and they really kind of give you a sense of what your character does. And the idea here is to pick all the traits that form the core of what you want your character to be, because in the core system of this game, you don't really level up. There's no leveling system. There's no character advancement. Basically, whatever traits you pick, that's who you are. And that would work great for short campaigns or one-shots. If you wanted to play a longer game, there are some optional rules for advancement which allow you to get up to 7 traits. And then after that, you can swap out traits for new ones every so often if you really want to change things up. And that's the whole shebang. Now, weapons are split into 3 primary categories: light melee, heavy melee, and ranged. Yeah, that's all. And items and equipment. Items and equipment focus on what your character is carrying. They give a really neat optional item tracking rule, which allows you to kind of have item slots on your character on different locations. You specify, this is my character's, this is this part's their backpack, and this group of item slots is their belt pouch. This group of item slot is their other belt pouch. This group of item slots is the bandolier across their chest, and then you can slip in what items are in those slots, writing it down on your sheet, so you can kind of track where your stuff is if you want to use it optional. I think it's kind of cool. The system itself is so simple that adding this in doesn't really cost anything, and it's not complicated. There are rules, optional rules for expending and depleting items, which is kind of cool. Pretty basic, but interesting. And then we get into running the game for the game master, and they have rules on how to create enemies. And there's a very basic chart which kind of runs down how many hit points each enemy should have and how you run combat. Combat itself is a pretty straightforward process. It uses zones, or actually, I should say, the baseline of the system assumes that all characters are moving roughly 25 feet per round when they take a move action. You can have up to 2 actions per turn. One can be move, one can be attack, one can be evade, or one can be perform a test of some kind. So let's say if you want to run up to a opponent and then evade, then you get to run up to them and then take the evade action, which means that anytime, if that opponent tries to attack you, then you get to make your evade roll, and if you succeed, then you don't get hit. It gives you that extra layer of defense. When it's time for attacking somebody, initiative. Initiative is done by rolling 2d6, and then highest number goes first. And then the DM also, or the game master also rolls for their monsters. 2d6, highest number goes first, kind of thing. And re-roll if you get stuck in the same position. You re-roll to decide who goes first for those groups. Unless you're like me and you like simultaneous initiative, which comes and goes. When you make an attack, it's the same process as a normal check. You're rolling 1, 2, or 3d6. And if one of those die comes up a 5 or a 6, then your attack has hit and you deal 1 point of damage to the opponent. No, there's no multiple damage. There's optional rules if you want to add in variable damage, but it's really like the variable is not that great. And I personally think that I'd leave it alone just for the purposes of speed of play. Now, there are ways to have your weapons and your attacks deal more than 1 point of damage if you use traits, and you can get traits for that. But for the most part, it's 1 point of damage per successful attack. Armor, should you want to be like a really super armored person, you can take a trait that actually just gives you extra hit points that you lose first, and they cannot be healed. They have to be repaired, and it's really just giving you a blade of armor. But I like it because it's a simple process. There's not a whole lot of complication to it. It's easy to understand, and it works. So the rest of this book, there's a whole bestiary of monsters. Each one of them, I'll give you a look at the pages. Each one of these monsters, for the most part, has an illustration. They're very simple black and white illustrations, but they're very evocative at the same time. And I like them. I like them a lot. I think the artist did a great job. I say simple, but I don't mean that in a negative sense at all. I think they're incredibly elegant in that simplicity, because they show you exactly what you need to know what this monster is without a lot of clutter. And I think that's fantastic. And after these illustrations, lots of dinosaurs, by the way. If you judge your monster books by how many dinosaurs are in something, you're going to be pretty happy with this book. There's lots of dinosaurs. You could do a really great Lost World campaign here. There are rules for advanced traits that can only be taken after a certain other one has been taken. So if you really want to be like that archmage or an archdruid or a paladin, then you can select these extra things. And the supplemental materials add in things like bards and other ideas. You can also, like, if your DM is using the alternate material, you can take the Grandmaster advanced trait, which is meant to facilitate or emulate a Grandmaster in martial arts, but then you can start using it with weapons and give your character all sorts of crazy abilities when it comes to using their weapons. Like, if you like watching, say, an animated show that has lots of cool weapon effects, like I can turn my sword into a fire blade because I'm awesome, and things like that, you can work all that in. There's a lot of great stuff. And then from there, there's more of the combat rules. There's also a great quest generator. It's a die generator. A D66 generator rolls on a kind of a graph, and you use a couple of different roles to select the verb, the subject, the place, the hindrance, and then any against, I guess. So that'd be like, not only the hindrance, but like, who your other enemies are. And you roll on those selections, and then you've got a basic outline for a quest, which you can use to kind of flesh things out. I personally, I think I don't know if I would use this one. I might use it. I might use it once or twice just for funsies. I kind of like the one that from Tavern Trawling that I mentioned in previous videos, so I'll probably keep using that. But this is neat too. And from there, the rest of this book, almost 2/3 of the book, are micro settings or small settings that you can use to kind of just charge your imagination and let you see exactly everything that this game can do. I'm not going to go into detail about those settings because there's a lot. But that's the interesting thing about this game, is it is very, very simple to run. You can master the system in minutes. And then you spend the rest of the time learning how to kind of how it all works together. So you master the rules, you understand the rules in minutes, but then after that you can spend time uh, putting it all together. So in a sense, I liken it to kind of a game of checkers or a game of chess. Easy to learn, but the fun is in playing it, not in learning the rules. The fun is in putting together combinations of things that maybe you didn't anticipate or your opponent didn't anticipate, and you enjoy yourself that way. It also, the rules are so simple, so a lot of the complication stuff can get out of the way, and you as a game master can just run a story, and I think it's really cool for that. Potential downsides to the system, well, there isn't a lot of advancement rules, so if you're the kind of person that really craves that advancement and that's more important to you than anything else, then this system might not be for you. Then again, maybe give it a try anyway, but just use the advancement rules that allow you to get up to 7 traits and give it a shot. Because honestly, especially when we talk into rules about bound accuracy for game systems, or the idea that because one of the core tenets of Tiny Dungeon when it was first being kickstarted, it was this idea that people were making their game systems so that when your character leveled up, they got more bonuses, and it was easier for them to do things. But then the monsters also correspondingly became harder, and so did the tasks. And so really, the original designer decided, really, this is not really representative of how life is, or it's not really all that fun, because the margin of success doesn't really change all that much. Just the numbers that we add together when we're rolling our dice. And that can feel artificial once you look deep enough kind of under the hood, as it were, of our role-playing game system, and watch, your character gets more powerful, so your opponents get more powerful, and so their armor class just gets higher, their number of hit points gets huge, and your character is, and so like you get all these hit points, great, I can do so much more, but then everything else takes so much longer, and all it does is just bog things down. So they stripped all that away and just said, no, what you get at the beginning is what you've got, and instead let's tell a story. And I kind of like that. I like that, especially for a story focused game that maybe won't last. Maybe I'm not going to run a game that's going to last for 2 years. Maybe I just want to play, a 10-session game telling a quick story with my friends, or a sandbox, and see where things go, and not have to stress about, are they 5th level so that I can send them against this creature yet. Oh, just send them against the creature because they are what they are. And then it's their job to figure out how that is. You don't have to sit there and try to balance things, because the game hasn't set up a system, a challenging system to require you to balance things. And so I think that that's part of why Tiny Dungeons is still pretty cool, because I don't have to think as hard to make sure that what I'm doing sounds cool in my head, but is it going to work rules wise? Is it going to be fun for the players? I don't have to worry about that, because I know that it will be fun for my players, because it is going to be cool, and not because the rules are going to mess up what would otherwise be a good time. And so that's the strength. I guess I kind of messed up the rest of my other reasons, because I really kind of included them with the rest of this rant. Yeah, so the first one being that the rules are simple. The second one being that it's highly adaptable to a lot of different settings. Those are available in like Tiny Wastelands, Tiny Pirates, Tiny Frontiers, which is the space version of the game. Those are all books that are coming in my direction, or the PDFs I've already got, and they're a lot of fun. You can get decks of cards to help you come up with more interesting stuff. Oh, and then the other thing is that the last thing, excuse me, is that while you do, it's very modular. If you've got something that you really want to plug in, they kind of show you how to do that in a lot of senses. Like, for example, I mentioned that everyone moves about 25 feet per round. But if you really want like combat zones, say, then they're there. There's an option for combat zones. But let's say you want something different other than that. Well, you just plug in what it is that you want, try it for a session or two, and then plug something else in, because there aren't any codependent subsystems that are going to break because you tried something. And that's one of the glorious, beautiful things about any rules light system, is it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to break permanently. You can hack it, and you can have good hacks and bad hacks, but it's harder to break it. The last part I want to talk about, because I like talking about how easy is it to read? How easy is it to see as someone with a visual impairment? So let's talk about that. It's a digest-sized book, which I like. So it's about roughly the size of your usual paperback novel, maybe slightly larger. It is slightly larger than the usual paperback novel. But the print size is, probably according to most people, huge. I'll give you an idea here. Let's look at that. Look at that print size. All right, that's a digest-sized book. And you got my hand for scale, but the print is really, really nice. And it's big, and it's bold, it's easy to read. There's not a lot of art that gets in the way. There's no places where there's like art, and there's a few like places where there's shading behind for like the charts and the graphs, but it doesn't take over. It doesn't mess things up. When they use italics, it's very clear what's going on. They're describing, a setting, and so they give you italics for like the kind of fluffy descriptions of things, and then go back to standard text for everything else. But everything is laid out very cleanly, very crisply, and it's easy to read. It's a joy. I've been reading this I've had it on my bedside table for a while, and I read it when the light's kind of dim and it's a little harder to see. Maybe I got a good lamp, but it still gets dim sometimes in the world. And I can read this no problem. I have no issues reading this book at any time, and my vision is terrible compared to some people. Most people. It's not that bad. There's a lot of people that have worse vision than I do, so I'm not trying to, you know what I mean. My vision's not that great. It's not that bad, and this book is perfect for me. It might just be perfect for you. Go ahead, give it a try, give it a look. I am not affiliated. I have no connection. I'm not getting any kind of kickbacks. No one asked me to do this kind of review. None of my recommendations are the things that anyone's asked me to do so far. These are things that I just really like, and I think that maybe you'll like them too. Tiny Dungeons. Gallant Night Games is the maker of this. You can get it on DriveThru. That's where I got my copy. It's pretty awesome. And that's about all I got to say. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, please like the video. Maybe subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And leave a comment. Let me know, what kind of adventures have you done with Tiny Dungeons before? If you've played it before, what have you done with it, and how did it go? Did you play something that was long-term, or did you only play like one-shots? I think that this would be great for working with kids and students and anyone who is new to the game, to the hobby, and just wants something to play. I think this would be perfect for that. So thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Peace be with you. Bye-bye.